VeloVoices. Many voices, one passion. Pro cycling for fans by fans.
Hello and welcome to podcast number 9 for VeloVoices on May 12th. We are a week into the Giro, and I'm joined tonight by Tim and Kitty, both in London. How are you guys doing tonight?
Really well, thank you.
Yeah, really good, thanks.
Yeah, Tim's doing well because he's killing us in Fantasy League.
Oh, yes.
All right, well, man, this first week of the Giro has been super exciting. I don't think even the time trial was exciting. And I don't really like time trials all that much to watch, but this was a great time trial. So what we're going to do tonight, we're going to actually talk about the stages that happened over this first week. Then we're going to review some of our riders that we picked in the last couple of weeks. We're also going to talk about some of our favorite moments. We're going to talk a little bit about our VeloVoices Fantasy Cycling League. And then we're going to outline the next couple of weeks at the Giro and also this week at the A-Talk in California. So with that, Tim, why don't we start with you talking about Stage 1, which happened last week in the city of Naples.
Yeah, so Stage 1, a nice flat city circuit stage around Naples to start with. Actually, pretty good for an opening stage. You know, my star rating out of 5 would be a 3 out of 5. In terms of what happened, we had a solo attack by former Olympic rower Cameron Wurf. We had a big crash 2 kilometres from the finish. And then Mark Cavendish made a big charge from an awfully long way back to steal the stage away from under Elia Viviani's nose.
Yeah, with hands banging on the bars for Viviani. So, all right, Kathy, and then what about Stage 2?
Well, Stage 2 was a very short team time trial. I give it a star rating of 2 out of 5 because, to be honest, the teams lined up, they went down the ramp, and Team Sky won, which is just what everybody thought. Movistar and Astana were 2nd and 3rd respectively, and young Salvatore Puccio from Sky took the Maglia Rosa, and he looked really thrilled with it. It wasn't a blowout performance by Team Sky by any means, so yeah, it just kind of went as predicted.
Yeah, and you were saying also that it wasn't quite the performance that BMC might have hoped to have.
No, they didn't step up nearly as much as we thought we would, although Taylor Phinney has been having problems with hay fever.
Yeah, I was impressed with the Movistar team in that stage. They had a pretty great time trial for them. So, all right, well, Stage 3 was supposedly this mildly rolling Amalfi Coast ride until these 2 small categorized bumps at the end, which saw just complete chaos in the peloton, which is great. What happened was, as far as a star rating, I would think this is a 4 or a 5 out of 5, just because of the last 2 bumps here with the crazy descending. So what happened is Luca Paolini seized basically the Maglia Rosa in his maiden Giro appearance. He basically slipped away from the peloton 7 kilometers from the finish and managed to open a 16-second gap on everybody. And then he got 20 seconds in time bonuses. But what I thought was really interesting about this stage was we saw who was a good descender and who was not already by Cadel Evans, who finished 2nd, and Ryder Hejadal, who was attacking left and right on the downhill sections. I loved how aggressive he was. And for me, this has been basically one of the most exciting stages we've seen so far in the Giro.
I would agree with that.
Tim, how about Stage 4?
Okay. Yeah, Stage 4. This was kind of maybe a 3 out of 5, maybe a 4 out of 5. It was mostly flat, but with a couple of punchy medium climbs late on, and the final summit coming just 5 kilometres from the finish. So we had a late attack by Danilo De Luca and Colombia's Robinson Chalapud, and they survived until about 300 metres from the line, and then Bardiani Valvoli's Enrico Battaglin surged off the front to take victory. So a maiden Giro win for the second-year pro, and by far the biggest win of his career. And for a wildcard team like Bardiani, this makes their entire season.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest win of that young team, right? It's career. If you take that whole team, that's basically their biggest win. So congratulations to them. And we'll talk a little bit more about the domestic teams a little bit later. All right, so Kathy, that takes us then into Stage 5, which you star rated at a 5 out of 5.
I did. It said it was a flat stage, but as with all the Giro stages, it seems there's always that little twist. And it had a Cat 4 climb 20 kilometers from the finish. So what happened was a waterlogged finishing straight made the Argonaut train derailment on the last bend to the finish line almost inevitable. This forced John Degenkolb to charge after, again, Bardiani's Marco Canola, almost from the Flamme Rouge to overtake him 200 meters from the finish. And he won this just amazing stage victory. And you saw the Jared Gruber picture of him just, splayed out at the end looking like he was in agony, which I think is really going to be one of those defining photographs of this year's Giro. The interesting parts were the fact that Cavendish wasn't able to get across that final climb in any sort of position. So whether that was just he just didn't have the legs and his team tried to get him across or what, but something went awry there. And then Wiggins was caught behind a crash again. And Cadel Evans, he's just in the right place at the right time, and he breezed home unperturbed. But it showed that Wiggins didn't have that kind of protective bubble of sky that he's used to, because he just seems to be in the wrong place at the wrong time most of this week. So that's my analysis.
Yeah, when they showed the rain, I can't remember where that stage actually finished, the name of the town, but when they showed the rain on the roads there, it was a river at the finish line. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, if these guys come into a sprint finish in this, it's going to be a crash fest. And even after it had dried off a little bit in that final turn, a bunch of guys went down. So I'm glad that everybody was safe. I know there was one Argonaut who went down in that turn there, but he's okay. So, all right. So Tim, then what happened in the next stage? Or is that me?
That's you.
That's you.
I'm just so used to you talking about Mark Cavendish that I couldn't help it. Okay, so stage 6 was a flat stage. And this is where Cav kind of makes his comeback after not being able to get over the hill. This stage seemed really built for Cavendish almost. I mean, the quick-step train worked like clockwork, and Mr. Cavendish MBE was basically dropped off by Gert Stegmans with 100 meters to go. And when he has 100 meters to go and there's a couple guys on his shoulders, nobody can beat him in a dead-on sprint. He's basically showing us again that in a dead-on sprint, he's the fastest man on the planet. And what I really loved about the stage, obviously, was Cav was ultra class on the podium when he held up Walter Wayland's 108 number. And I think everybody was touched by that. And it made for a great way to remember Walter, and it also made for, it was just a great display of sportsmanship in cycling. So, all right. So Tim, I'm sorry you didn't get to talk about Cav, but
that's all right. I'm sure I'll manage to talk about him later. So I assume your star rating for that is 108 out of 5.
Well,
Mad crush.
My star rating for that, it was a good stage, and it was a sprint finish. So I'll give it a 3 out of 5.
Cool. So that takes us on to stage 7 then, which was I think one that I described in our preview as being as lumpy as anything.
Yes.
And that's exactly what it was. There were 4 classified climbs late in the stage, and Adam Hansen rode solo for the last 20 kilometres in, again, torrential rain to take a fantastic victory. But all the action was happening behind him as attacks piled on the pressure. Riders crashed all over the place on the slippery roads, not least Vincenzo Nibali and Bradley Wiggins, with the latter losing the best part of a minute and a half to many of his rivals and looking incredibly tentative on the descent. But Adam Hansen winning, how much did we love that?
Oh,
yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, we'll get to that when we talk about favorite moments. All right, and that brings us to stage 8. You can only give a time trial a 3 out of 5, but this is a great time trial. I mean, Tim, you and I were kind of marveling about the parcours of this TT with that steep uphill finish and how, it's an hour and 16 minutes basically of pain for these guys. And what a glorious win by Alex Dowsett, right, to ride over that 55-kilometer technical course. Basically a dream ride for him. Not so much for Wiggins. He actually had to do a bike change during the time trial. I think he had a flat. I think that's what it ended up being. So he's basically 10 seconds down on Dowsett. And then both Nibali and Evans put in particularly strong rides. And Hajidal, however, did not, losing time. So this was a stage where we thought Wiggins was going to put minutes on people, and it turns out that he not only did he not win the stage, but at the end of this thing, the GC's pretty tight. So and Nibali takes the Maglia Rosa, which brings us to stage 9.
which was today, which was another, solo breakaway in the torrential rain. This time it was, I'm giving this a star rating of 4 out of 5, by the way. Maxim Belkov of Katusha shrugged off his breakaway companions 50 kilometers from the finish. He just basically bombed downhill and then nobody caught him. Carlos Betancourt basically did a Pizzato because he didn't realize that Belkov had crossed the line about 45 seconds before he did. So he came across the line, arms aloft, and there was a very wry, smiling Pantano behind him because he knew that he was celebrating second. The GC contenders finished in a bunch except for Ryder Heichdale again. He lost about a minute on them, dropping from 6th to 11th in the GC. The things I would say is that Wiggins again is just descending. Well, he said he's descending like a girl, and I would like to see Marianne Vos show him how to descend. But, boy, he really doesn't, set out to charm people, does he? And Astana's team tactics, they were controlling the peloton, and even though there had been some comments that saying, oh, well, they're not going to be able to do that for 2 weeks, Garmin and BMC, as soon as they realized that Wiggins was in trouble because he was yo-yoing off the back, for pretty much the 50 kilometers, they just started to drill it. So as far as the other teams are concerned, they are going for Team Sky until they break them, I think, and then they'll turn on each other. So
interesting. Well, so Tim, at the end of 9 stages, kind of summarize, where are we at in the race?
Yeah, so the GC going into the first rest day. In the Maglia Rosa, we've got Vincenzo Nibali. Cadel Evans is 29 seconds behind him. And then a little bit of a surprise, although he was a rider that you picked in our preview, Chris.
Yeah.
Robert Hessink is a minute 15 down. So that's your top 3. You've then got Bradley Wiggins, who's a second behind Hessink. Michele Scarponi is 5th. Sergio Henao is 6th. Mauro Sant'Ambrogio 7th. I'm gonna really enjoy doing this now. Przemysław Niemiec from Lampre is 8th. So, apologies to anyone who speaks Polish. I know I've got that horribly wrong. And then 9th and 10th, Rigoberto Urán and Tanel Kangert from Astana. So Sky, interestingly, have 3 riders in the top 9. And then beyond the top 10, Kathy's already mentioned Heijadal is 11th, but we've also got a clutch of riders who, all of whom are within about 4 minutes or so, who can be looked at as danger men going into week 2. So you've got former Maglia Rosa Benyatin Chausti, Sammy Sanchez, who had a nightmare really in both time trials, and then AG2R's Domenico Pozzovivo, all of them capable of attacking in the mountains and putting people into trouble. So
Tim, I mean, how much time do you think you have to have to the current Maglia Rosa to be able to be a contender? Are we talking 3? If you're within 3 minutes, you're still a contender, or do we know enough that we could say something like that? Because is Ryder really still in it?
I think it would be very. I think if you're more than 3 to 4 minutes behind now, it's really difficult. Ryder's at something like 3:10, 3:15 back, I think.
Yeah.
And he all it takes is one good stage. Yeah, maybe he gets in the breakaway. The peloton miscalculates. He gets a minute and a half, and all of a sudden he's right back in it. And it wouldn't be beyond the realms of possibility for a rider who's really struggled in week 1 to suddenly find his form towards the end of the race as others start to get a bit tired. But it's difficult. There's a lot of people ahead of him. At more than 3 minutes back, you're looking at probably 5 or 6 of the top 10 to need each of them to have a bad day at some point for him to overhaul all of them. But
yeah, well, with the upcoming parcours too, who knows what could happen? I mean, anybody could have a bad day in some of these big, huge mountain stages. And there could be crashes. I mean, with the descending and the wet conditions we've seen so far, really nothing is out of the realm of possibility. And isn't that why we love the Giro?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
We're going to try to make some predictions right towards the end of this broadcast, but it's almost impossible because the parcours and the weather and the fitness of the riders, it's all over the place right now, which is why we love watching. All right, well, what about some of the other jerseys, Tim?
Yes, so points classification, that was on Mark Cavendish was holding the red jersey. But that's with Cadel Evans, who finished 5th today. He's now taken the lead in the points classification. I think it's still just about possible for a sprinter to take it, but with considerably more mountain than flat stages to come, it's most likely to be a GC contender, I think, who takes the Maglia Rosso again this year. As far as the mountains classification is concerned, very, very early days. It's Bardiani again, it's Stefano Perazzi who leads that classification, but we've only just had the first Category 1 climb of the race, so there are an awful lot of points to be scored between now and then, and we can expect that classification to change quite dramatically, certainly over the next week. And then in terms of the other final major jersey, the best young rider, Vilko Kelderman, who's a creditable 12th overall, he leads that competition, and his Blanco team also hold a slender lead in the team classification over Sky. But again, I'd expect that to change in the mountains pretty significantly.
Yeah, I think we're going to see Carlos Bentancur overtake him in the mountains. I mean, he's a great climber, so we'll see. I know he's 3rd right now in that classification. All right, well, that's a great sum up. So let's talk about, the Giro always provides brilliant moments. So let's talk about our favorite moments from these first 9 stages. And I guess I'll lead out with, Tim, you talked about it a little bit, that stage 7 finish with Adam Hansen. For me, that was the most beautiful thing that's happened this week, to watch a guy who goes out and works like a dog for his team, mile after mile. I mean, Hansen's one of the only guys who, I think he's the only guy last year who actually participated in and finished all 3 Grand Tours.
I think they're also saying something about that he might be one of the few that actually do 5 in a row.
Yeah, what a hard man, right?
Yeah.
And you wouldn't expect him to win on a sunny day, because that's not the type of day he wants to win on. He wants to win on the most miserable, rainy, slickest. That win on stage 7 and the smile on his face as he came over the line, I thought it was brilliant. So, all right, Kathy, what about you?
Mine was stage 3, and I think my favorite moment was Cadel Evans finishing 2nd to Luca Paolini. I just think that, the first week of a Grand Tour, particularly the Tour de France, is either a sprinter stage or, Cancellara wins the yellow in the prologue, and then he just looks beautiful for a week. But, the GC guys just really kind of take it easy and have a look around and make sure their teams are all right. But, everybody has just come out, absolutely ready to race. And, stage 3 when Ryder attacked and Nibali attacked and Cadel was there and they were all just going for it. I just thought, this is going to be a hell of a race.
Yeah, Evans, I don't know why we're surprised by this, because he knows where to be in the first week of a Grand Tour. He is super savvy about race positioning, and that's what's given him all his time this week. It's not like he's ridden away from anybody, really. He's just been in the right place at the right
smart,
time.
Yeah.
So, Tim, tell me, what was your favorite moment so far of this Giro?
I think for me, it's one we've talked about already. It's stage 5 and John Degenkolb's win. And here's a guy, he'd started the year fairly slowly. This was actually his first win of 2013. He did it despite losing his lead out, despite basically having to spend the entire last kilometre having to chase down Marco Canola solo. And you could see on his face, even before he hit the line, how much pain and how much it was costing him physically. And then at the end, we've talked about Gerard Gruber's image of him collapsed off his bike.
Right.
It's spectacular. And we talked about, in the preview podcast, we talked about how the Giro gives us these great images that end up being seared on your mind. And that, for me, is one of them. It says everything about what a tough sport this is. But do you know what? Seriously, the 1970s porn star Tash, lose it.
There are a couple. We saw a Lamprey guy have one of those today.
I love it.
So I think it's some sort of bizarre, I don't know, dare.
He looks like he's a villain who's going to tie a woman down to a railroad track. All right, so those are some of our favorite moments, and I'm sure the next 2 weeks are going to provide great moments as well. Okay, so what have been some surprise? What surprised you so far on this Giro? Tim, what do you think?
I was going to say Alex Dowsett, but today's stage actually made me think again. So for me, the biggest surprise of the week has to be Katusha. Here's a team who were reinstated at pretty short notice. consequently, they've sent what could really be considered to be a bit of a makeshift team to this race. So just look who isn't here. Joaquim Rodriguez, Denis Menchov, Danny Moreno, Simon Spilak, Mikhail Ignatiev, Alexander Kolobnev, Alexander Kristoff, who's probably the best sprinter that most people haven't heard of.
Right.
And just look at what they've achieved this week. Stage wins for Luca Paolini and Maxim Belkov today. 4 days in the Maglia Rosa for Paolini. Aside from Omega Pharma Quickstep, they are the only team with two stage wins so far. So it has been a stellar first week for them. And it's been a stellar Giro for them. You know, they pitched up at the race, hoping to snatch a stage win at best.
Right.
And they could pack up and go home tomorrow and be delighted with what they've achieved.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, they've brought their B team to the Giro. Just think about how good they could be at the Tour de France. People better wake up, because J-Rod's going to be bringing it at the Tour, and he's going to have some great guys around him. So,
could you imagine how many times Menchov would just randomly fall off his bike this week, though? I mean, he'd just be on the ground the whole time.
With these slick conditions, it wouldn't surprise me. So the thing that has surprised me, and Kathy, I think you mentioned this before in one of your favorites, is how well Cadel is going. I mean, I knew that he'd be hanging around the top 10, but if you told me that he would be like in the top 3 and that he's basically, 20-something seconds off the GC leader right now, I wouldn't have believed that in the first week. And so, it's going to be interesting to see if his form just continues to get better and better over the next 2 weeks, and if he really gives, the Astana team all they can handle in Nibali. But the other thing that surprised me, and maybe this is a little bit of a negative, I'm surprised how unprepared Sky has been to go downhill in bad conditions. I mean, these Giro descents are kind of known to be treacherous. The weather in Europe hasn't been great this year. You would have thought that they would have been really practicing descending, because the Giro in the past a lot of times has been decided by guys who can descend. If you look at guys like Il Falco, right? Guys would scream downhill, gap people, and get huge time on people. So I'm really surprised that these guys have been so timid going downhill. Kathy, any surprises for you?
Well, actually, I'm going to agree with both of yours. Actually, the Cadel one particularly, but yeah, the Team Sky for me and Wiggins in particular. Do you know what? I think there's a couple things that are interesting in that. This year, this season so far has just had absolutely atrocious weather. So we had Milan-San Remo, we had really, really bad, horrible conditions where you had to just, suck it up and do it. And I think it's really telling that Wiggins has not raced very much this year. And I think it's really showing now, because he's not used to, he's been, in the Canary Islands for God knows how long. And, I'm assuming there's not that many treacherous descents there. And it just kind of shows that, because you need to be in the races, and you need to be in those kind of conditions, and you need to, to have to race those, I think.
Yeah, and you see guys like Nibali, who did do Milan-San Remo, right? And Tirreno Adriatico, right? Terrible conditions there, but he comes prepared. He's a good descender anyway, but he really comes prepared for these conditions. Okay, so we talked a little bit about Bradley Wiggins just now. Now let's go through and talk about some of our Giro picks and how they're doing. So what we'll do is we'll go through each one of them, we'll kind of give them a grade, and then we'll just briefly talk about what our thoughts are about each one of these riders. So Tim, why don't you, Kathy and I just basically buried Wiggins, but why don't you tell us your thoughts and kind of give him a grade?
Yeah, okay, so grade for Bradley Wiggins, I am going to say a C. Now, before I launch into explaining why, I think two things have been obvious about Wiggins this week. Firstly, that he's obviously been buying his luck from the same place as Geraint Thomas, as he always seems to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And secondly, that his confidence on wet descents is absolutely shot to hell. It's comparable to Andy Schleck at his worst. And yesterday, second place behind Dowsett in the individual time trial after a bike change was actually okay, even if it didn't match many people's expectations. But then today, again, he was tentative, and we can be sure that multiple teams will target him from here on in, just as they did today. He's fourth. He's only just over a minute behind Nibali. He is still very much in touch, but if he wants to become champion, he is going to have to ride like one in the mountains now, and Sky must surely be thinking about looking to Sergio Henao as a plan B.
Interesting. All right, and almost just the opposite of him is Vincenzo Nibali. So, Kathy, how do you grade him?
I'm going to have to give him an A because he's really not put a foot wrong. He's been taking his chances. He knows that Wiggins isn't good on a descent, even on a dry, clear day. Wiggins isn't that great. And he just started attacking. That stage 3, it was great. He's really worked on his time trialing over the winter. And boy, you could tell on Saturday's time trial because he minimized his losses to Wiggins. It surprised everybody, I think. But, he did a great time trial and he's come here to win and he doesn't care who he has to bulldoze to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I almost thought he was going to win the time trial yesterday. That's how good he was. Until that final hill, he was looking pretty. I mean, he even looked good on the hill. So, all right. So then we come to Ryder Hejjedal, and I will give him a grade of a C-. And, for me, Ryder had an A- going into the TT. He was aggressive. He was great on the descents. He was where he needed to be, when he needed to be there. But then he just kind of fell apart in the time trial. And then today, he looked terrible. He looked like maybe he was sick or something. And now he's dropped out of the top 10 GC. So for Ryder to get back in this race, some people are going to have some bad luck, and he's going to have some extremely good days. And that's too bad for Ryder because I really like him, and I think he's really tried to prepare for this, but it's just not working out. So Tim, what about Sammy Sanchez?
Yeah, well, I guess if Ryder's a C-, then Sammy probably has to be a D. And having targeted the Giro as his main focus for this year, I think we all had high hopes for him. And despite losing a chunk of time in the team time trial, he was quietly going about his business and looking pretty good until yesterday, really, where in the time trial he gave up over 3 minutes. So he now has got a mountain to climb, both literally and figuratively. And I imagine that he and his team will be trying to figure out what his objectives should now be. The top step of the podium probably looks out of reach now, but top 5, that's a possibility. Stage wins, or maybe even the King of the Mountains jersey, but he must be bitterly disappointed.
Yeah, and then we come to that boy Finney, Kathy. What do you make of him?
Oh, I love Finney. I'm going to have to give him a C, though, and I should probably maybe give him a C-, because he's not really featured as much as we thought he was going to in the team time trial or in the time trial. But, he's been suffering with hay fever, poor little baby. He's got some allergies. And but he still delights. He's still tweeting. He's still, he wore pink jeans and made pizza. So, I'm not going to be too harsh on him.
That's true. He really does love the Giro, and the Italian fans love him. So it's great to see him. Robert Gesink, I'm going to have to give him an A-. I mean, he's currently sitting third on GC, and who would have thought that after the first week? Certainly not you, Kathy.
No, I was going to say, not me, Chris.
Wink, wink. He's had a great ride. He's been almost like Cadel Evans. He's been in the right place at the right time. He's stayed out of danger. He's towards the front. And for Gesink to get 11th in that time trial, that's a pretty great effort for him. He's not known to be this great time trialer. And now we're entering the time of the race where we are getting to the parcours where he's good. So who knows? I would not be surprised to see Gesink on the podium. And I would not be surprised also to see him really give Nibali a run for his money. So, all right. Tim, now you get to talk about your boy.
Man crush.
Mark Cavendish. Yes. Right. Grade A++++++++.
No!
I think he's he won stage 1 with a late charge despite losing Gert Stegmans with a mechanical in the last kilometre. Fantastic charge into a headwind there to overhaul Viviani and Goss and all the others. He didn't quite make it over the final climb on stage 5, despite the fact he was He was weaving all over the road, desperately trying to latch onto the back of the peloton, but I think he was the first to admit that he doesn't quite have the climbing form that he needs at the moment. But he dominated the bunch sprint on stage 6, when he did for once get a good lead out from his team. And you know what? Quite frankly, he could have had an A just for holding up Wouter Valence Dossard on the podium on Thursday.
Yeah,
That's a good
right.
point.
I'll agree with that.
Super class. And then, of course, let's talk about some of his main competition, John Degenkolb.
Yeah, Degenkolb, as we said, he won stage 5 with that really strong solo charge in the closing kilometre, but he was caught behind the crash on stage 1, so he didn't really figure there. He was something like 13th or 14th, I think, on stage 6. So again, the Argonaut train didn't really quite work there, and we've yet to see this at the end of the first week. We've yet to see him and Cavendish genuinely go head to head.
Yeah, so maybe it would be nice to see that. All right, so we had a couple dark horses, too, that we thought... Well, actually, Kitty named the unnamed dark horse, but she's going to name the dark horse right now and give him a grade.
Now, I'll tell you why I'm doing this is because you guys persisted in keeping an extra guy, which I think you were cheating. You are podcast doping, and I don't think that's very fair. So, you know what? I'm going to do whatever I want. So my dark horse, who gets a grade A, by the way, is Cadel Evans, because nobody picked him. And, he's sitting second.
Yeah, he's looking great.
And it's your guys' punishment for cheating.
I'm just going to say this now. I reserve the right to nominate another dark horse after stage 20.
No! No!
All right, so the other two guys that we named last week in the dark horsery was Rigoberto Urán and Sergio Henao. And I'm just going to talk about those two together because I can't separate them. Any other domestiques normally, I mean, if they were in the top 10, you would have to give them an A automatically. But I hold these guys maybe to a little bit of a higher standard. And the reason I'm giving Urán a B and Henao a B+. Henao had a fantastic time trial. But they have not kept Wiggins where he needed to be. It's their job to make sure that he gets to where he needs to be, and they just haven't done it. And I don't know if it's because they're not capable of doing it, or it's just been miserable conditions and trickery,
or maybe because
he
just slides off the back so many times they can't figure out where the hell he is.
Or is it because they have ambitions of their own? So, I mean, these two guys sit in the top 10 of the GC. They're brilliant climbers. They've shown us that this season already. So who knows where they could be at the end? But so solid work by these guys to stay in that top 10, but a little bit not solid when it comes to shepherding the guy who's your team leader and making sure he's in the right spot. All right. So that's how we grade some of the riders that we're looking at. Okay, let's talk about some of the wild card teams, because I think we've had some actual interesting wild card action this year at the Giro. So, Tim, why don't you start? Give us a grade for the Androni squad and tell us about what they've been up to.
Okay, so Androni Giocattoli Venezuela, to give them their full name. I am going to give them a grade B, I think. So for me, without ever quite finding that elusive combination of luck and opportunity, they're having a pretty good race so far for a team which is basically set up for the mountains rather than the flats. So they do have a sprinter, Mattia Gavazzi. He's had a pretty eventful time of things. He was one of the riders that was caught up in that crash on the opening stage. He took a 5th place on stage 6, but he's not a big name. He's not expected to produce any big results. Other than that, as you'd expect, they've had men in the breakaways on 5 of the 7 road stages so far, including J-Rod, that's Jackson Rodriguez, not Joaquin, and Emanuele Sella. He's been in the break twice, and on stage 7 he was the last man to be dropped by Adam Hansen as the Aussie carved out that fantastic solo win. And how's this for an omen? On the 2 stages that they haven't managed to get a man in the breaks, that's stage 1 and stage 6, the winner has been Mark Cavendish. Go figure. But yeah, I mean the time trials, the less said about them the better. Gavazzi in the individual time trial on Saturday had the distinction of finishing 200th and last, 17 minutes down. But they have. To be fair, they've had a couple of good results. Fabio Fellini was second behind Enrico Battalin on stage 4. Sella is currently 4th in the King of the Mountains. Fellini and Diego Rosa are 7th and 9th respectively in the Best Young Rider, and Franco Pelazzotti the end slightly bittersweet. He's 19th on GC, 5 minutes down. So he's going to be an interesting guy to watch because, this, like I said, this team's set up for the mountains. He's 5 minutes down. He will probably have a little bit of leeway if he wants to go on the attack, maybe go after a stage win, or maybe even the mountains jersey. So I think we can expect the Androni boys to be pretty active over the next week or two.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do. So that brings us to another team, the Bardiani Valvole CSF Inox squad, and I have to give them a grade of an A. I mean, these guys have animated the first week of this Giro, and who would have expected that stage win? I think it was, stage 4 for Enrico Battaglin. I mean, nobody was expecting that. So really great job for that young team to get a stage win in the first week. I mean, any other team would fly home and say they've already had a successful Giro. And then you had that superb effort that we mentioned where Degenkolb, basically goes past Marco Canola on stage 5 at the very end. But it looked like, Canola, they were going to go back-to-back wins on stage 4 and 5. So that team is looking great. And then lastly, right, we have Perazzi, who's lighting it up in many of the breakaways, and even today went out and then took basically the lead in the King of the Mountains. He now leads with 38 points. And so he's definitely shown his cards of what his ambitions are for this Giro, and I think that's to try to win that mountains classification. So you got to give those guys an A. And then how about Vini Fantini, Kathy?
Well, the glow sticks, as I like to call them, I'm going to give them a C, and I don't have nearly as many facts about everything that's gone on as Tim does. But then anybody that knows me knows that I wouldn't. So I would think that maybe it's the weather, being it's been all dark and rainy, and the fluorescent yellow of the glows really shines out. But I mean, they seem to have been very active in the first week, but they've not really had any real result. The only real result they've had was with Danilo De Lucas, third place in the Adam Hansen stage. And to be honest, for me, it's a shame it was De Luca because I really have no idea how he's continued to race because I think he's been done twice for doping, and I thought that was a lifelong ban. But anyway, let's not sully everything with that.
Well, one thing I will say about the Vini squad is they do have San Ambrosio, who's still kind of looking pretty good in the GC. So we'll see what happens there. Okay, so now let's talk about our Fantasy Giro League that we set up on Velogames. Fantasy cycling is a blast, and we started this Velogames League for the Giro. The nice thing about the Velogames, and we were talking a little bit about this before the podcast, is that you can pick one team and you don't have to fiddle with your team day after day. And for us, that's really important because we're trying to get up all the content on VeloVoices to keep you guys up to date on what's going on, and we don't really have time to pick a new team every day. So, what do you love about fantasy cycling, Tim?
I think it's just the fun of it. There's a certain amount of skill involved. There's a certain random element, and it makes you think a little bit beyond the teams and riders that you normally would. So I find it's a way for me to broaden my interest in the race.
Yeah, and I love the trash talking aspect. Like as soon as we set up the league, I was starting to get tweets from people just saying, "I'm going to thrash you, Panache. You're toast. I can't wait to beat you." And I love that. And you're right, you get to test your knowledge, right, as a kind of a team director. And Tim, I do like that fact that you said about being able to pick different guys from all around the Pro Tour and even the domestic, right? We get to see some guys that we don't see normally. So, and then what about you, Kitty? What do you like about it?
Do you know what? I feel that my stint as DS for Team Fondue with Cancellara next year might be a bit premature because I'm really, really bad at this.
Well, I think it's really interesting to see some people pick riders they know are going to help them win, and some people are like, I just pick riders that I like.
I just pick riders that are pretty. That's all.
Yep. Well, we've had a great turnout for our league. We have 114 people who have joined our VeloVoices League, so that's huge. That's great. So I just want to give some props to the top 3 so far. Right now, Colin with Team Prettiest in Pink, suitable name. He's leading with a whopping 2,177 points. And then we have one of our favorites, John Baines.
Yay.
Yeah, Design Defined, right? Leading, his team is Team La Tête de la Course, and he is in second with 2,105 points. And then we have Spencer Downing with team We Stopped Eating Sausages with 2,071 points. There are still a long time to go in this, so we'll see if those guys can hang on to their lead. Now, as far as the VeloVoices are concerned, Tim, I got to give you props. You're out of the 110 people, or 114 people that we talked about, you're sitting 10th right now.
Hey, that's not bad for a fantasy cycling virgin.
That is not bad, and I'm sure that you just picked your team in a whim too, right? You just was like, I have 5 minutes, I'll just pick a team. And then we have Jack, who's in 28th. Cherie is in 37th, and then I'm lagging back there in 48th, but I'm on the rise. And then we have, I was like second to last or something like that in the first 2 days. So, and then we have Ant at 83rd, and then Kitty.
Lost.
Kitty is our lantern rouge, so to speak, in the VeloVoices right now at 89th. So,
but I do have Nibali and Evans on my team, so I'm hoping,
I'm telling you, man, if you picked Inchausti right now, you are sitting pretty. And I think both Tim and Jack have Inchausti. So.
Oh, well.
All right. So just a couple. I've noticed looking down the list. What are some of your favorite team names that you've seen? Tim, what's your favorite?
I kind of liked Neil's Team Sky Blues, not because of the name, but just because he picked a Marmite jersey to go with it, which just kind of sums up Sky. But do you know what? But think about it. Actually, I really like Prettiest in Pink. Again, not because of the name, but just because I love the Psychedelic Furs song.
Oh yeah, and Molly Ringwald. Who can forget? All right, and then Kathy, did you have any favorite names?
I never fancied her.
Did you have any favorite teams?
I quite like Meows in Pink from Miss Meow. I don't know what it is about Twitter and cats, but anyway.
That's who you like. All right.
Yeah.
There are a lot of creepy Twitter cat people.
Although I've got to say the dogs in wigs are really starting to charm me. But there you go.
So my favorite team is this Max team, who named his team the Bone Idol Wankers, which of course is after the Wiggins quote from the tour. But Team Squeeze the Garmin also came in close second because I thought that was pretty creative. So thank you so much, you guys, for participating in our league, and please continue the trash talking. We love it, and we'll see who wins at the end. I think for the top handful of finishers, maybe 3 to 5. Kathy was planning on sending you a fridge magnet, so
yep,
we will,
or maybe a variety.
Oh,
I don't know. I haven't had them made up yet.
Okay, so we'll see. All right, so Tim, let's talk about what's coming up in the next in week 2 of the Giro.
Yeah, okay. So the middle section of the Giro, 6 days. It's bookended by 2 pairs of mountain stages, and it will start to turn the small chinks of time that we're currently seeing between the contenders into gaping chasms. So on Tuesday we start with the first proper summit finish, which comes at the top of Alto Piano del Montasio. It's steepest at the bottom of the climb. The first 3 kilometres averages 12.5% and includes ramps at 20%. So that's going to really sort out who's got good legs and who hasn't. Yeah. And then coming off the back of a rest day as well, you never quite know how people are going to react. So that's going to be the first real selection, I think, that we're going to see. Stage 11 the following day is medium mountains with a second category summit finish. It might well be one for a breakaway rather than a GC slugfest, given the difficulty of what's to come. The next 2 days after that should allow the overall contenders to take a bit of a pause for breath. First up, there's a flat finish in Treviso, which is almost certain to finish in a bunch sprint. That's then followed by the longest stage of the race, 254 kilometres to Busseto Carrasco, with that's got a noticeably lumpy last 50 kilometres. So you can see what's going to happen. The sprint boys are going to try and keep it all together, but I reckon this is tailor-made for a breakaway or maybe a small classic-style group that splits off late on. Stage 14 then is the first Alpine stage, which comes on the Saturday. That's uphill pretty much all day, and then we get to Sestriere, which is a well-known climb, particularly in the Tour. It's followed by a summit finish on Bardonecchia, which is just a nasty grind. It's 7 odd kilometres, virtually all of it's at 9 to 10%. It's going to hurt all the way up. And then finally on the Sunday, we've got the biggie as a little slice of the Tour de France meets the Giro. It's the final stage before the second rest day, so riders can pretty much leave it all on the road, knowing that they will have an extra day to recover. There are 3 big climbs. There's the Col du Telegraph, that drops the riders off at the foot of the Galibier for what promises to be a big showdown.
Yeah, that's going to be a brilliant stage. That's going to be a great week. So okay, what do we think the GC is going to look like at the end of next week after the riders climb the Galibier? Kathy, what do you think is going to? Who's going to be top 3 in GC?
I think that it'll be between Evans and Nibali at this point. They'll have consolidated some time at the top. Mm-hmm. I think Wiggins will have abandoned the Giro by that time.
Wow.
And Henao might actually be in third by that point because he'd be free to ride his own race.
Wow, that's some crazy prediction right there.
But you know what? I'll be right.
All right, I expect it to look like it exactly like it does now. I think that Nibali will lead, that Evans will be in second, and Gesink will be in third. And I could actually see those 2 switching places because I think Gesink could do something crazy on that climb up to up the Galibier. So we'll see. And Tim, how about you?
I'm going to cheat a bit, I think. Do you know, I think...
Really?
we said earlier in the podcast that it's really, really difficult to make predictions at this stage, and I think we will get a few surprises over the next week. So, firstly, I'll be amazed if there are more than 4 or 5 riders still in genuine contention, by which I mean within 3 minutes or so of the race leader. In the top 5 for sure, I think we'll see Nibali and Evans. For sure, we will see one Sky rider, but almost I'm in agreement with Kathy. Whether that's Wiggins or Henao remains to be seen. And then just kind of filling out the top 5, I think we'll see a couple of others who, one of whom I think will be Gesink, who is a bit of a surprise in week 1, and then one maybe from outside the current top 5, who just has a good week in the mountains, and I will plump for Mauro Sant'Ambrogio for that.
Oh, I hope so, because my fantasy team really needs those points. All right, now Kathy, you mailed me last week and told me that you're actually going to the Giro.
Yes, I am so excited. I am a froth with excitement.
So jealous.
I believe. My friend Roz Jones runs a tour company. She does trips to the tours, and she had somebody drop out, so she just said, Are you available to go? Do you want the place? And I just practically bit her arm off.
Oh, man. You won the lottery.
So I'm going to Saturday and Sundays. So Sestiere and Galibier. And I am just so excited because looks like we can go to both the start and the finish of both of those.
Oh.
So hopefully I'll get to be able to see and speak to some of my favorite riders, and it's just going to be fantastic. It's going to be fantastic.
Brilliant. Oh, well, Tim and I will be sitting at home trying to see you on television.
Just look for the Kermit arms. I'm going to make everybody do Kermit arms.
Awesome. All right, so that's what's going on in the Giro. Now, over here in the United States, we haven't talked much about this on VeloVoices, but over here tonight, actually even as we're speaking, the first stage of the Amgen Tour of California is going on. And this race is 8 stages, and we're going to be covering it just a little bit on VeloVoices. We're going to do a little feature called A Tick About a Talk, and you can catch up with what's going on in each stage there. But just let me tell you who's featured. Riders like TJ Van Garderen will be there, Thomas de Gent, Michael Rogers, Dave Zabriskie, Andy Schleck will be there, our world champion Philippe Gilbert will be there, the Velvet Samurai Peter Sagan will be there, of course Sohan Chavanel will be there, and Jens, who if you haven't listened to or read our interviews with him, please do that. And then, of course, domestically, our funny man Phil Gaiman will be there. So there's so many riders that are going to be riding this race. Let me just give you just a brief description of the parcours so you know what's going on. Tonight starts in Escondido, and it's 165 kilometers, and they actually go over Mount Palomar in the first stage, right through the middle. But that should probably end in a sprint finish just because of everybody's fresh, and the end isn't that hard. The second stage is 200 kilometers. It is long. They climb through the San Jacinto Mountains, and then there'll be a finale on the slopes of this tramway that has a 5.7 kilometer climb with over 9% grade. So the GC guys will show their cards tomorrow, and we'll know kind of who's in it there. Then stage 3, it's 177 kilometers from Palmdale to Santa Clarita, and there's more climbing, but we'll probably see a sprint finish. This is kind of tailor-made for a guy like Sagan. Stage 4 is very similar. It's 133 kilometers. It's rolling, and it definitely favors a sprint at the end. That's from Santa Clarita to Santa Barbara. And then stage 5 goes from Santa Barbara to Avila Beach. It's 185 kilometers. It's hilly, but we should probably see a sprint finish at the end of this. With 300 meters to go on that finish, there's a very narrow left-hand turn. So it'll be interesting to see how everybody gets through that. And then on stage 6, we have an individual time trial, and this is very similar to the one we just saw. It's shorter. It's only 31 kilometers, but at the end, with 3 kilometers to go, the riders gain over 1,000 feet of elevation. So that's going to be a leg breaker. And then stage 7, we have Livermore to Mount Diablo, and this is the 146-kilometer Queen stage with a summit finish on Mount Diablo. And this is a real climb. On a clear day, you can see 320 kilometers in every direction around that mountain. It's no joke. So this is the climb and stage that will decide the winner. And then stage 8 is beautiful. It's San Francisco to Santa Rosa. It's 130 kilometers of rolling hills. And it's the third time in 52 years that the Golden Gate Bridge will be closed for a special event. So looking forward to seeing that and seeing the beautiful countryside of California. And this is the only time during the year where we get to watch 2 races over a whole week, right? We get to watch the Giro in the morning, at least in the United States, and then we get to watch the Amgen Tour of California at night. So it is super exciting. Do you guys get to see any of that over in the UK, or is it just way beyond your bedtime?
No, we're getting coverage on Eurosport, aren't we? I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Although I have to say, it by about 10 o'clock, I'm neither use nor decoration. So.
Yeah, I tend to watch it the day after. But of course, the defending champion is otherwise occupied in Italy at the moment, isn't he?
Yes, he is. So we will see what happens this year. I know that a lot of people are predicting that TJ Van Garderen is kind of the guy. But Thomas de Gent has shown up to win, and people are also saying that Michael Rogers would like to repeat. So I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think he'll give it a good shot.
Yeah, and Sagan won 5 stages last year.
He did, and I think he's got an opportunity to win 3 or 4 at least this year. So he's just racking up stage wins at the Tour of California. Anyway, it's a great race. It's covered here in the United States on NBC Sports, and a lot of, it's really some of the only exposure that people get during the year, other than the Tour de France, to racing here in the United States on some of the bigger networks. So. All right, well, that is us for tonight. Be sure to follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/VeloVoices. Become our friend there. Follow us on Twitter at VeloVoices, and make sure you read our musings on the blog at VeloVoices.com. Tim and Kitty, thanks for the entertaining and technically imperfect night.
You're welcome.
We'll see if we can stitch this all together. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night.
VeloVoices. Many voices, one passion. Pro cycling for fans by fans.